You eat clean. You avoid junk. You cut sugar, salt, fats. Your meals look perfect on paper and even better on Instagram. But here's the problem. You're tired. Not had a long day tired. Deep, constant background fatigue. You wake up already drained. Coffee barely works. Your mood is worse. Your patience is gone. And the most confusing part, your blood tests often come back normal. This is where most people get angry, because they're doing everything they were told is healthy, and the body is not getting better, it's getting weaker. What if the issue isn't what you're eating, but what clean eating has quietly removed from your life? In this video, I'll show you why modern clean eating often becomes a low-energy diet, how it slowly pushes the body into survival mode, and why millions of people mistake discipline for health. Stay with me, because by the end, you'll know whether your fatigue is random or self-inflicted by doing everything right. Modern clean eating rarely means balanced. In practice, it usually means subtraction. Less salt, less fat, less carbohydrates, smaller portions, more rules, more control, more restraint. What almost no one checks is the final result, total usable energy. You can eat the cleanest food in the world and still underfuel your nervous system, your muscles, and your brain. Here's the uncomfortable truth. The human body doesn't run on food quality alone. It runs on energy availability. When calories drop too low, when sodium is restricted, when fats are minimized and carbs are constantly feared, the body doesn't say, "Great, we're getting healthier." It says, "We're in a long-term shortage." And shortages trigger adaptation, not optimization. Energy gets conserved, non-essential functions get downregulated, motivation drops, mood changes, recovery slows. This is why so many people say, "I eat perfectly, but I feel worse than before." Clean eating didn't make them weak overnight. It made them efficient at surviving, not thriving. And once the body switches into that mode, fatigue is not a symptom, it's a strategy. If this sounds familiar, the next block matters because the first thing most people cut is exactly what the nervous system depends on. Salt isn't just seasoning. Sodium is an electrical mineral. It controls nerve signaling, muscle contraction, blood pressure stability, fluid balance inside and outside the cells. When people adopt clean eating, salt is usually the first thing to go. Not because the body asked for it, but because salt was labeled as bad. Here's the problem. When sodium intake drops too low, especially in people who drink a lot of water, sweat, walk a lot, train, or consume caffeine, the nervous system starts misfiring. The most common signs aren't dramatic, they're subtle and chronic. Lightheadedness when standing up, heavy legs, brain fog, weakness that feels hard to explain, fatigue that sleep doesn't fix. People blame age, stress, weather, hormones. Rarely do they suspect salt. And this is where the paradox appears. You reduce salt to protect your health, but your body has to raise stress hormones just to keep blood pressure and circulation stable. That stress response costs energy. So the fatigue isn't mysterious. It's the price of compensation. Important clarity. This is not an argument for excess salt or ignoring medical conditions. It's a warning against zero-salt thinking. Clean eating often removes sodium without replacing electrolytes, without context, without feedback from the body. And when electrical systems don't get enough charge, performance drops. Next, we need to talk about the second silent cut, the one that destroys satiety, hormone signaling, and long-term energy even faster than salt. Fat became the enemy long before clean eating. Clean eating just made the restriction look virtuous. In real life, low-fat, clean diets create three silent problems. First, energy density disappears. Fat is the most concentrated energy source in food. When you remove it, meals look large but deliver very little usable fuel. Second, satiety breaks. Without enough fat, people feel full briefly, then hungry again an hour later. This creates constant grazing, cravings, and mental fatigue around food. Third, absorption fails. Vitamins A, D, E, and K require fat to be absorbed properly. You can eat perfectly clean vegetables and still run functionally deficient. Over time, the body adapts by slowing things down. Metabolism becomes conservative, hormonal signaling becomes less efficient, recovery takes longer. And here's the key point most people miss. This doesn't feel like malnutrition. It feels like low mood, poor focus, cold hands, reduced motivation, the sense that you're doing everything right but moving backwards. People respond by cutting more food, more discipline, more rules. But restriction doesn't fix underfueling. Clean eating often removes fats in the name of health, then wonders why energy, resilience, and mental clarity disappear with them. And if fat restriction sets the stage, the next cut, carbohydrates, usually pushes the system over the edge. Carbohydrates aren't just sugar. They're the body's most accessible energy source. When clean eating turns into carb avoidance, something predictable happens, especially in active people, stressed people, poor sleepers, and anyone over 35. The brain starts rationing. Muscles lose quick responsiveness. Workouts feel heavier. Walks feel longer. Thinking takes more effort than it should. People describe it like this: I'm not sick, I'm just flat. Here's what's really happening. Without sufficient carbohydrates, the body shifts toward emergency energy strategies. Stress hormones rise to keep blood sugar stable. Cortisol fills the gap that food should have covered. This is why many clean eaters feel wired but tired, anxious but unmotivated, alert yet exhausted. And the most misunderstood signal appears in the evening: strong cravings for sweets, bread, or snacks. That's not lack of willpower, that's delayed compensation. The body waited all day. Now it's demanding fuel. Instead of recognizing this as an energy issue, people blame themselves, then cut carbs even harder the next day. That's how clean eating quietly turns into a stress loop. Carbs weren't the problem. Timing, quantity, and context were. And once carbohydrates are restricted on top of low fat and low salt, the system doesn't adapt gracefully. It downshifts. Which brings us to the point where fatigue stops being a feeling and becomes a biological strategy. The body doesn't collapse when energy is low. It adapts. That adaptation is often mistaken for aging or burnout, but in physiology, it has a clear name: low energy availability. When intake stays below demand, not for days, but for weeks or months, the body stops investing in performance. It conserves. Energy is pulled away from recovery, reproductive hormones, thermoradiation, motivation, and drive. What remains is function, not vitality. This pattern is well documented in athletes, but the same logic applies to non-athletes who live in a constant clean eating deficit. You don't have to be starving, you just have to be consistently underfed relative to your life. The result is familiar: poor sleep despite exhaustion, slower recovery from simple activity, loss of strength and resilience, mood flattening. And here's the critical mistake. People respond by tightening control even more. They assume the problem is discipline, not depletion. But no amount of clean food fixes an energy gap. At this stage, fatigue is no longer a warning, it's a protective mechanism. The body is forcing you to slow down because resources are limited. And when energy scarcity combines with mental rigidity around food, the damage isn't just physical, it becomes psychological. That's the next block. At some point, clean eating stops being about health and starts being about fear. Fear of the wrong food, fear of breaking rules, fear of losing control. Meals become decisions, decisions become pressure, pressure becomes stress. This is not discipline, it's cognitive load. Every restriction requires mental energy. Every avoided food keeps the nervous system slightly activated. Over time, that background tension drains more energy than the food itself provides. People don't notice it because it looks responsible. It looks like self-control. It looks like health. But inside, the system is never relaxed. This is why many clean eaters feel tired even on rest days. The body never fully exits alert mode. The paradox is cruel. The cleaner the diet becomes, the less flexible the person feels. And flexibility is a core marker of health. This doesn't require a diagnosis or a label. You don't need a disorder to be affected. All it takes is rigid thinking layered on top of chronic underfueling. When food becomes something to manage instead of something to use, energy stops flowing naturally. And at that point, fatigue is no longer just physical, it's neurological. Which brings us to the most important part of this video: how to recognize that you've crossed this line and what actually restores energy without swinging to the opposite extreme.
Here's the simplest test. No ideology, no labels. If your diet is truly working, you should have stable energy across the day, clear thinking without constant stimulation, predictable hunger, not sudden crashes, normal recovery from basic activity, emotional range, not flatness or irritability. If instead you recognize several of these signals, it's a red flag. You wake up tired even after enough sleep. You feel weak or lightheaded when standing up. You're cold more often than others. You rely on caffeine just to feel normal. You crave carbs at night after eating perfectly all day. You feel anxious about eating outside your rules. This is not failure. It's feedback. The body is extremely honest when it's underpowered. And the fix is not junk food. It's not chaos. It's not anything goes. It's restoring enough. Enough total energy. Enough sodium for your lifestyle. Enough fat for satiety and signaling. Enough carbohydrates for brain and muscle work. Enough flexibility so food stops being a stressor. Health is not purity. Health is capacity. If eating right makes your life smaller, slower, and heavier, something is off. And once people understand this, two things happen. They stop blaming themselves, and their energy comes back faster than they expect. That's why this conversation matters, because fatigue isn't always a mystery. Sometimes it's just the cost of trying too hard to be clean.
The biggest mistake modern nutrition made was confusing restriction with health. Your body doesn't reward cleanliness. It rewards adequate fuel, balance, and adaptability. If your diet removes salt, fat, carbs, pleasure, and flexibility, and replaces them with rules and fear, the result won't be longevity. It will be fatigue. Real health looks boring. You wake up with energy, you think clearly, you recover normally. You're not constantly fighting your own appetite. That doesn't make headlines, but it works. This video isn't telling you to eat garbage. It's telling you to stop starving your system in the name of virtue. Because a diet that drains your energy isn't clean. It's just unsustainable. If this perspective challenged you, share it. Someone you know is tired and thinks it's their fault. And if you want more conversations that cut through nutrition myths and focus on what actually restores the body, subscribe. Energy is not optional. It's the baseline for everything else.